I knew I didn't belong the second I stepped into the gala. The chandeliers sparkled above, but every glance felt cold. I had borrowed the dress, done my makeup in the bathroom mirror of the subway station, and worn the only heels I owned, scuffed at the edges, one lace slightly torn. I had triple knotted it before leaving home, praying it would hold. But that didn't stop the laughter. I heard it from behind the champagne flutes. Quiet, sharp. A group of women in glittering gowns looked down at my feet, whispering like I was invisible. One of them smiled and said, "She must have walked here from another decade." I kept walking, pretending not to notice, but each step felt heavier. Even my niece, who had begged me to come, pretended not to see me as I passed her table. I finally sat near the back, trying to disappear. My fingers trembled around the napkin I clutched in my lap. I wasn't angry, I was just tired. Tired of always being the outsider, of always pretending I was okay. But just as I lowered my eyes, I heard a hush spread across the room. Then footsteps. Slow, certain. When I looked up, he was standing there, him. The CEO. The man everyone admired, feared, envied. He didn't speak to the crowd. He didn't ask permission. He walked straight to me, knelt down without hesitation, gently lifted my foot and tied the loose lace. "Now everyone can see the strongest woman in the room," he said softly. And just like that, the silence turned into awe. The moment his fingers touched the worn lace of my shoe, the entire room seemed to freeze in disbelief. Gasps echoed like shattered glass across the tables. I could feel every stare pressing into my back, but for once I wasn't shrinking. I was holding my breath, not out of fear, but because it felt like the first time someone truly saw me. His hands were steady, slow, not rushed or performative, as if he wasn't just fixing a shoe, but restoring something inside me I hadn't realized was broken. A quiet respect, a sense of worth. When he looked up at me, his eyes weren't curious or embarrassed. They were kind, warm, familiar in a way that made my throat tighten. "They can laugh at your shoes," he said, barely loud enough for others to hear, "but not one of them could walk your path." I couldn't speak. My eyes blurred with tears I didn't dare let fall, not here, not now. But his voice steadied me. Not a single person moved, not even the orchestra. It was as if the entire gala had been reduced to this moment. A woman in old shoes and a man who saw past the floor she stood on. I tried to stand, but he helped me gently, brushing invisible dust from my hem. And then he did something that made jaws drop. He offered me his arm, not as a savior, but as an equal. And when I finally found the strength to meet his gaze, I saw no pity, only pride. He didn't walk me out of the shadows. He stood beside me, and the room could no longer look away. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd like a storm rolling in from the sea. Low at first, then urgent, chaotic, tangled with disbelief. Did he really kneel? Isn't she just the janitor's niece? Why her? But none of their questions mattered anymore, because the moment I stepped forward, my hand lightly resting on his arm, the energy in the gala changed. It wasn't just shock, it was reevaluation. The same women who sneered at my scuffed heels now pulled their gowns closer, suddenly unsure of their footing. The men who hadn't even glanced in my direction before now adjusted their ties, trying to make sense of what they'd missed. But he didn't look at them. He kept his eyes on me, like I was the only thing in the room that made sense. And I realized something. This wasn't just about shoes. It was about dignity. About not apologizing for the path I took to arrive here. My lace had come undone because I was running to make deliveries between shifts, not because I didn't belong. The dress I wore had been borrowed, the heels from a thrift store, but the heart beneath it all? That was mine. Untouched, unashamed. And as we walked across the marble floor, past chandeliers, champagne towers, and judgmental eyes, I didn't feel small anymore. I felt real. Seen, like maybe the lace wasn't a flaw, but a story, and he had chosen to read it aloud. I didn't know what the night would become, or who I'd be in their eyes tomorrow. But in that moment, Under the weight of their silence, I walked tall, because someone powerful had reminded them, and me, that grace doesn't come from a label. It comes from how you choose to kneel. The next morning, I woke up still wearing the same heels I'd arrived in, laces now double knotted, as if to anchor me to the moment that had changed everything. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from coworkers, distant relatives, even strangers. Screenshots of me and him, frozen mid-kneel, had flooded social media overnight. Some called it romantic. Others accused me of staging it. A few insisted I was just lucky. But no one asked how it felt to be humiliated first. No one wanted to know what it did to someone when laughter echoed louder than music in a room full of diamonds and egos. They saw the fairy tale ending, not the shame that came before it. I sat on the edge of my mattress, thin, squeaky, crammed against the wall of the studio apartment I could barely afford, and tried to hold both truths. Yes, he had stood up for me. But before that, I had stood alone. And I couldn't forget that. I couldn't forget the way the waiter hesitated to serve me hors d'oeuvres, the way the photographer subtly avoided my direction, the way a woman in a sequined dress whispered "wrong gala" under her breath. My shoes were just the excuse. They had seen me as disposable long before that lace unraveled. And though the CEO's gesture was powerful, it didn't erase their cruelty. It only exposed it. That morning, as light poured through the cracked blinds and settled on my second-hand dress hanging by the door, I knew I had to decide. Would I let one moment define me? Or would I use it to rewrite the rest of my story, lace, laughter, and all? When I finally opened the door to leave for work, I found a neatly folded note wedged beneath it. Just my name, written in a bold hand I didn't recognize. Inside, a short sentence. "I'm sorry they made you feel less. You never were." No signature. No explanation. But I didn't need one. My breath caught in my throat as I reread it twice, then a third time. It wasn't just a kindness. It was a lifeline. After years of being invisible in designer-filled rooms and board meetings where I only poured coffee, someone had seen me. Really seen me. And in that instant, the night before began to shift. The laughter still hurt. The humiliation still echoed. But now there was something else, an acknowledgement. A flicker of dignity returned. I tucked the note into my coat pocket like a secret, a shield. As I walked down the hall, past neighbors who usually ignored me, I caught a glimpse of myself in the elevator mirror. Same black coat, same tired eyes, but something inside had straightened. I wasn't just the girl with old shoes anymore. I was the girl whose story they'd tried to rewrite and failed. The gala had tried to make me feel small. The crowd had tried to laugh me into silence. But his voice, the CEO's voice, had cut through all of it, not to rescue me, but to remind them who they were mocking. And that morning, I realized I didn't need a title or an invitation. I didn't even need them to apologize. What I needed was already in my pocket. Proof that someone, somewhere, believed I deserved better. At work, the office buzzed with a strange, quiet energy. No one mentioned the gala, but their glances lingered longer than usual. I kept my head down, organizing files with shaking hands, my mind racing between shame and defiance. Around noon, my supervisor, who'd barely said a kind word in 2 years, approached me with a clipped voice. "The CEO wants to see you. Now." I froze. My chest tightened. For a moment, I feared this was retaliation, that I'd somehow caused trouble by simply existing in the wrong dress in the wrong room. I walked to the executive floor like I was stepping onto a tightrope. When I entered his office, he looked up from his desk. No tie today, sleeves rolled up, eyes softer than they had been across the room last night. "Sit," he said gently, gesturing to the chair across from him. I did. He reached into a drawer and pulled out something I hadn't expected. My shoe. The one with the broken lace. "They mailed it to me anonymously this morning," he said. "Thought you might want it back." I blinked, confused, until I noticed something new. The lace had been replaced. Not just fixed, restitched with care. Silk ribbon. Strong. Elegant. "You didn't deserve what happened," he said, voice low, sincere. "And I'm not going to pretend tying your shoe fixed that. But they need to know you're not beneath anyone here." He pushed the shoe across the desk slowly. "Not at this company. Not at any gala. Not anywhere." I took it with trembling hands, unable to speak. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not as a worker, not as background, but as a person worth defending. The next day, a photo surfaced online. I didn't post it. I didn't even know someone had taken it. But there it was, circulating quietly on social media. The CEO on one knee, tying my shoe. My face wasn't even fully visible, just the edge of my expression. Shocked, confused, deeply human. But his face was clear. Focused. Protective. The caption was simple. "Respect looks like this." By noon, the image had gone viral inside company chat groups. By evening, it had made its way into business blogs and women's forums. They weren't talking about me as the janitor anymore. They were talking about the message. About how often people in service uniforms are rendered invisible. About how dignity isn't something you earn with a title, but something you're owed as a human being. I didn't ask for the attention, but suddenly I became a symbol. My coworkers avoided eye contact at first, then offered quiet nods, awkward apologies. Even my supervisor, once cold and dismissive, left a fresh pastry on my desk without a word. But the most unexpected message came through my phone, a text from the CEO himself. "If anyone gives you trouble again, send them to me. Also, don't be late to tomorrow's staff meeting. We're promoting you." I stared at the message in disbelief. Promotion? Me. I hadn't even applied. I reread it a dozen times, heart pounding. It wasn't just about the job. It was about being acknowledged, truly acknowledged, for everything I'd survived, everything I had quietly built while no one was watching. For the first time, I wasn't background noise. I was the headline. The meeting room was fuller than usual, buzzing with an odd mixture of tension and curiosity. I sat at the far end, still in my uniform, heart racing, unsure if I even belonged there. Some whispered when I walked in. Others simply stared. A few offered tight, embarrassed smiles, the kind people wear when they're unsure how to treat someone they used to ignore. The CEO entered without his usual entourage. He scanned the room once, then looked directly at me. "Before we begin," he said, walking toward my side of the table, "there's someone here we've all overlooked for far too long." My breath caught. He was talking about me. "She works harder than anyone I know, treats everyone with more grace than they often deserve, and last night reminded me of something vital. Leadership begins on the ground." He pulled out a small envelope from his pocket and placed it in front of me. "This is a formal offer. You'll oversee operations for the next phase of our expansion." The room went silent. My hands trembled as I opened it. Position, salary, benefits, all spelled out in ink. A complete shift from janitor to facilities director. I hadn't even dreamed this far. I stood up, unsure what to say. My voice cracked, but I found it. "Thank you," I whispered, holding back tears. "Not just for this, but for seeing me." The CEO nodded gently, then added, "Sometimes it takes one quiet moment to remind us who's really holding the building up." Around the table, heads turned. And this time, they weren't just looking at a cleaner. They were looking at someone they now had to respect. When the meeting ended, I didn't rush out. People came to shake my hand, some awkwardly, some genuinely. A few tried to recall moments we'd interacted before, as if rewriting their own memory could erase the indifference I'd endured. But I wasn't holding on to resentment. I was still trying to believe it myself. Just last week, I was mopping corners no one noticed, swallowing tears in the break room, and now they were asking for my opinion. As I walked down the corridor, still holding the envelope, a younger employee stopped me near the elevators. "Is it true?" she asked softly. "Did he really promote you?" I nodded. He did. Her eyes lit up, not with jealousy, but with something closer to hope. Maybe there's still a chance for the rest of us. That's when I realized this wasn't just about me. Every invisible person, every overlooked worker watching from the sidelines, had just seen something shift. Back in the hallway where I used to clean in silence, someone had taped a printout of the gala photo, the one where the CEO knelt beside me. Someone had written underneath in marker, "Respect isn't worn, it's earned." I stared at it for a long moment. I didn't need applause. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to remember that even the smallest steps of dignity echo louder than cruelty. And maybe, just maybe, that moment at the gala wasn't just about a shoelace. It was the first time someone chose to kneel, not because I was small, but because they finally recognized I'd been standing tall all along. The next morning, my locker had been cleaned out. Not by the cleaning staff, but by the assistant to the CEO. "He asked me to bring your things upstairs," she explained, gesturing toward a sleek office space on the executive floor. I blinked. "My things." She smiled, almost whispering, "You have a desk now, with your name on the door." The same floor where people used to walk past me like I was part of the wall, now held a space meant for me. As I entered, I saw a simple plaque. Operations Liaison Unipark. Not extravagant, not flashy, but mine. The walls were glass. Everything was transparent, just like I had always wished things could be. I stepped inside, barely breathing, as if it would vanish if I moved too quickly. On the desk sat a note in his handwriting. "For every moment they looked through you, I saw you. Welcome home." I had to sit down, not because of the desk or the office or the title, but because someone had cared enough to fight my invisibility. That mattered more than any marble floor or bouquet. It felt like everything I had endured, every dismissed word and turned back, had somehow shaped me for the seat. Not in spite of my past, but because of it. I wasn't just someone who'd been defended at a gala. I was someone being given a voice, a seat, and finally respect. And all I could think was, if someone like me could be seen, maybe there were others still waiting in silence, hoping someone would notice they were there too. But not everyone celebrated that shift. Whispers followed me down the hallway now, not of pity, but of speculation. Did she really deserve that promotion? Maybe he just felt sorry for her. It stung more than I expected. I hadn't asked for any of this. I never wanted charity. I wanted fairness. Still, every move I made was now magnified, analyzed, and twisted. I wore the same shoes I had worn the night of the gala, and someone from the PR team smirked behind her mug. Guess she's sticking to the Cinderella storyline. That night, as I walked out of the building, I caught my reflection in the glass. I wasn't glamorous. I wasn't styled. I looked like me, but for the first time I didn't flinch. I touched the laces he had tied and felt the knot still there. Not just in my shoes, but in my chest, in my spirit. A knot that reminded me I wasn't beneath anyone. I hadn't been picked up off the floor. I had always been standing. People just never looked down far enough to see me. Now that they did, some felt threatened. That wasn't my burden to carry. I sat alone on the bench by the sidewalk that evening, quietly reading my shoelace, not because it was loose, but because it reminded me where I had been and how far I had come. Not everyone needed to under. A few days later, I received an invitation I never expected. The board's annual strategy retreat. I wasn't supposed to be there, not yet. It was reserved for senior executives only. But my name was on the list, printed in the same font, no asterisk, no footnote. As I entered the resort conference hall, the stares returned, heavier now. Some nodded politely, others turned away. But when I spotted him, standing at the front, adjusting his watch, I paused. He looked up, then walked directly toward me. "They won't say it," he murmured. "But you earned this long before that night." I didn't respond immediately. I just looked at him. His tone wasn't performative this time. There was no audience, no spotlight, only truth. During the presentation, when it came time to divide into leadership teams, he deliberately assigned me as co-lead on the core innovation track. A man beside me whispered, "She used to mop the floors." I turned my head slightly and replied, and now I'm rewriting the blueprint. There was silence, not the kind born of awkwardness, but the kind that follows the sound of walls cracking open. I didn't smile to provoke. I didn't boast. I simply existed, unapologetically, in a room that was never meant to hold me. But now it did. And more than that, it needed me. Because sometimes the foundation isn't built by the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it's built by the one who learned to walk silently, even when everyone was watching. The ballroom was nearly empty when I stepped out to catch my breath. My shoes were still damp from the incident, but at least now the laces were steady, knotted with care by hands I never imagined would touch mine. I sat on the edge of the marble staircase, watching the last guests trail out, heels clicking, laughter fading into the night. A soft gust of wind crept in through the open doors, brushing against my arms like a quiet reminder. I wasn't invisible anymore. Behind me, I heard steps, measured, heavy, deliberate. I didn't turn. I didn't have to. You shouldn't have walked out alone, he said, his voice low but strained with emotion. You shouldn't have had to walk out like that at all. I felt the warmth behind his words before I saw him sit beside me, still in his tuxedo, hair now slightly tousled. The same man who had knelt in front of dozens of executives and socialites, just to fix my broken lace. He wasn't trying to save me. He was choosing to stand with me. I turned to him, unsure of what to say. My world had shifted too fast, and my words couldn't keep up. But he didn't need them. They won't laugh again, he whispered. Not while I'm standing. For a second I thought I might cry, but then I smiled. Not because of him, but because of me. Because someone had finally reminded the world that respect isn't reserved for those with titles. It's earned by those who walk through the fire and still remember how to kneel for others. We didn't go back inside. There was no need to return to a room that had already made its judgment, then swallowed its shame the moment he touched my shoes. The chandelier light spilled onto the steps where we sat, turning the marble gold and the silence sacred. I asked him quietly, "Why did you do it?" He looked ahead, not at me, as if the answer had lived in him long before tonight. "Because I saw myself in you," he said. "People used to laugh at my shoes too, just not to my face." That confession hit deeper than I expected. It stripped away the layers of suit and title, showing me not the CEO, but the boy who once stood where I was now, uncertain, overlooked, humiliated. "I know what it feels like when the room tells you you don't belong," he added. "So I made sure they knew who did." My chest ached, not with sadness, but with something warm, almost unfamiliar, dignity. For the first time that night, I wasn't the janitor they mocked or the girl with loose laces. I was someone they had to see, and not because I demanded it, but because someone else had chosen not to look away. His voice softened again. "You'll get used to being seen, and when it's your turn to kneel, you'll do it with grace too." I looked at him, truly this time, and I understood. He hadn't rescued me from shame. He'd rewritten its ending. And maybe, just maybe, that's how all stories should change, quietly, publicly, and without asking permission. When we finally stood up, the gala inside had resumed, champagne flowing, laughter echoing as if nothing had happened. But something had. A single gesture had rearranged the entire night, and everyone who witnessed it now carried a different story home. As we walked past the tall doors, people turned, some with lowered eyes, others with forced smiles. The same ones who whispered behind linen napkins were now suddenly quiet. The same ones who laughed had run out of jokes. But we didn't stop to meet their gaze. He held the door open for me, not as a performance, but as if it had always been mine to walk through first. A server nodded at me. A guest adjusted her shoes. And somewhere in the distance, I heard someone mutter, "She's with him." But that wasn't the truth either. I wasn't just with him. I had been seen by him, defended by him. And maybe that's what we all want, not to be rescued, but to have someone witness our humiliation and choose not to walk away. At the valet line, he turned to me again. "Don't change the shoes," he said, smiling. "They remind me why you're different, I almost laughed. I didn't need to explain that they were the only pair I could afford. Somehow he already knew. And still he knelt. In front of everyone. Not because I was important to the room, but because I had always mattered to him. Maybe the lace was just a lace. Or maybe it was the thread that stitched dignity back into my name. Either way, I tied it tighter this time.